Berlin, 1910. Imperial capital on the eve of war. Introduction. Welcome to a tour of Berlin in 1910, during the final years of the German Empire's golden age. At the dawn of the 20th century, Berlin stood as one of Europe's most dynamic metropolises, a powerhouse of industry, science, and culture, second only to London in population and ambition. This was the capital of Kaiser Wilhelm II, a city racing toward modernity, with electric streetcars, towering factories, and grand boulevards that rivaled Paris. Today, using advanced AI technology, we've transformed old photographs, engravings, and paintings into photorealistic scenes, bringing this vanished world back to life. We'll walk the same streets that Berliners walked over a century ago to show you what life was actually like in this imperial capital. But behind the gleaming facades of royal palaces and the elegant promenades of the wealthy existed a very different Berlin, one of cramped tenement courtyards, exhausting factory labor, and growing social unrest. The luxury of the Prussian aristocracy stood in stark contrast to the harsh reality of the working masses who built this industrial giant. By the end of our journey, we'll witness how this contradiction would explode into catastrophe, as Berlin and all of Europe plunged into the Great War that would shatter the old world forever. Unter den Linden, the Boulevard of Power. This is Unter den Linden, the magnificent central boulevard that stretched from the Royal Palace to the Brandenburg Gate. In 1910, this was the beating heart of Imperial Berlin, a showcase of Prussian might and German ambition. Picture yourself standing here on a spring morning. The wide avenue is lined with 4 rows of linden trees, their leaves creating dappled shadows on the pavement below. Elegant carriages rumble past alongside the newest marvel, electric trams, their bells clanging as they glide along steel rails. The sidewalks are packed. Prussian officers in spiked pickelhaube helmets stride past wealthy merchants in top hats and morning coats, while ladies in elaborate Gibson girl dresses, their waists corseted impossibly small, peer into shop windows displaying the latest Parisian fashions. Here stood the grandest institutions of the empire. The Royal Opera House, the Humboldt University where Einstein himself was teaching, the Crown Prince's Palace with its guards standing at rigid attention. The smell of roasted coffee and fresh pastries drifted from elegant cafes where intellectuals and artists debated the ideas of the day, expressionism, socialism, the writings of Nietzsche. But walk just a few blocks north or east, and you'd find yourself in a completely different world. The Scheunenviertel and Prenzlauer Berg districts, where tens of thousands of workers lived crammed into dark Mietskaserne, massive tenement buildings with tiny apartments facing sunless inner courtyards. These _0_ housed entire families in 1 or 2 rooms, sharing communal toilets on each floor. Today, Unter den Linden remains Berlin's ceremonial boulevard. The linden trees still stand, though many are replacements after wartime destruction. The Opera House has been rebuilt, the university renamed Humboldt-Universität. But the Royal Palace was destroyed and replaced by the East German Palace of the Republic, which itself has now been demolished and replaced by a reconstruction of the original palace completed just a few years ago. A strange echo of history rebuilding itself. This is Potsdamer Platz, and in 1910 this intersection was one of the busiest traffic hubs in all of Europe, perhaps in the entire world. Stand here in the center and you're surrounded by organized chaos. Horse-drawn wagons loaded with goods from the nearby Potsdam railway station jostle for space with modern automobiles, still a rare sight, driven only by the wealthy. Electric trams converge from 5 different directions, their overhead cables creating a metal web against the sky. Omnibuses packed with passengers lumber past, while bicyclists weave dangerously through the traffic. The cacophony is overwhelming. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the mechanical whir of trams, the shouts of street vendors selling newspapers and pretzels, the whistle of a policeman trying desperately to direct the flow. In 1924, this intersection would become home to the first electric traffic light in Germany. But in 1910, it was pure human coordination barely containing mechanical mayhem. Surrounding the square were the symbols of Berlin's commercial explosion, the Haus Vaterland, a massive entertainment complex, the Café Josti, where the city's bohemians gathered, the Grand Hotel Bellevue, housing visiting industrialists and foreign diplomats, Electric advertising signs, still a novelty, blinked from rooftops, promoting everything from champagne to cigarettes. Just beneath your feet, another revolution was taking place. The Berlin U-Bahn, one of Europe's first underground railway systems, had opened its first line in 1902. By 1910, trains were rumbling through tunnels beneath the city every few minutes, carrying 100,000 passengers a day, workers, shoppers, students, all moving at unprecedented speed. Today, Potsdamer Platz tells a story of destruction and rebirth. The entire square was obliterated during World War II, then divided by the Berlin Wall, becoming a desolate no-man's land for decades. After reunification, it was completely rebuilt in the 1990s as a futuristic complex of skyscrapers, shopping centers, and the Sony Center. Not a single building from 1910 survives. Only the name remains. The factories of Moabit and Wedding, the engine of empire. This is the industrial district of Moabit and Wedding on Berlin's northern edge. If Unter den Linden was the showcase, this was the engine room, where the real work of building an empire took place. Massive brick factories stretch as far as the eye can see, their smokestacks belching black coal smoke into the sky day and night. This is where Siemens and Halske manufactured electrical equipment, where AEG produced turbines and motors, where Borsig built locomotives that would carry freight and armies across Europe. The roar of machinery never stopped. Berlin's factories operated around the clock, in shifts that ground workers down to exhaustion. Step inside one of these factories, and the sensory assault is immediate. The air is thick with coal dust and machine oil. The temperature is sweltering near the blast furnaces, freezing in the assembly halls. The noise, the pounding of metal presses, the screech of cutting machines, the hiss of steam is so deafening that workers communicate only by hand signals. Men work 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14, for wages that barely keep their families fed. The workers here are a mix of native Berliners and newcomers from across Germany and beyond. Poles, Silesians, Ruthenians, all drawn by the promise of employment. They live in those same Mietskaserne we mentioned earlier, walking to the factories before dawn, returning after dark, their clothes stained with soot and grease. But these workers are also organizing. In the beer halls and union offices of Wedding, socialist ideas are spreading. The Social Democratic Party is growing stronger, demanding better wages, shorter hours, universal suffrage. The contrast between the workers' grinding poverty and the ostentatious wealth of industrialists in their Grunewald villas has created a powder keg of resentment. Today, many of these factory buildings have been converted into museums, art galleries, and apartments. Gentrification has transformed Wedding and Moabit into trendy neighborhoods. But walk past the old brick walls, and you can still see the iron hooks where pulleys once hoisted materials. Still smell a faint trace of machine oil in the air. The Tiergarten, the playground of the elite. This is the Tiergarten, Berlin's vast central park, and on a Sunday afternoon in 1910, this is where the city's social hierarchy is on full display. The park was originally a royal hunting ground, but by 1910 it had been transformed into an English-style landscape park with winding paths, ornamental lakes, and carefully manicured gardens. On pleasant days, it becomes a parade ground for Berlin's upper classes. Watch as elegant carriages roll slowly along the Siegesallee, the Avenue of Victory, lined with 32 marble statues of Prussian rulers. Kaiser Wilhelm II himself commissioned these monuments, and they embody everything about Prussian military pride and imperial grandeur. Ladies twirl their parasols, gentlemen tip their hats, children in sailor suits chase hoops under the watchful eyes of nannies. Near the lake, the Café am Neuen See is packed with the bourgeoisie, sipping coffee and eating cream cakes while a small orchestra plays Strauss waltzes. The smell of linden blossoms mingles with expensive perfumes and cigar smoke. But venture to the edges of the park, and you'll find a different scene. Working-class families on their one day off spread simple picnics on the grass. Dark bread, sausage, beer. They're not permitted in the fancy restaurants, so they make their own entertainment. Accordion music, singing, children playing football. The Tiergarten is also where Berlin's growing women's movement holds rallies, where political speakers address crowds from makeshift platforms, where police nervously monitor gatherings that could turn into protests. Today, the Tiergarten remains Berlin's green heart, though it was nearly destroyed during World War II. Desperate Berliners cut down trees for firewood during the freezing winter of 1945, and the park became vegetable gardens. The Siegesallee statues were removed by the Allies, most now stored in a depot. But the park was replanted, the paths restored, and it once again serves as Berlin's central refuge, though now without the rigid social divisions of 1910. The Scheunenviertel, Berlin's immigrant quarter. This is the Scheunenviertel, the _quote_1_, Berlin's most diverse and desperately poor neighborhood, just north of the elegant city center. The streets here are narrow, dark, and crooked, a stark contrast to the grand boulevards just a few minutes' walk away. Laundry hangs from every window, dripping onto the cobblestones below. The air smells of cabbage soup, pickled herring, coal smoke, and human waste from overflowing cesspits. This is where Berlin's Eastern European Jewish immigrants have settled, fleeing pogroms in Russia and Poland, seeking safety and opportunity in the German capital. By 1910, over 140,000 Jews call Berlin home, many of them here in the Scheunenviertel. You can hear Yiddish spoken as often as German. Small shops line the streets, kosher butchers, tailors working by candlelight in basement workshops, bookstores selling Hebrew texts. The poverty is crushing. Entire families crowd into single rooms. Children work alongside their parents, sewing garments for pennies per piece, producing the very clothes that elegant ladies wear while strolling unter den Linden, completely unaware of the conditions in which they were made. But there's also vibrant community life. On Friday evenings, candles flicker in windows for Sabbath. The synagogue on Oranienburger Straße, with its magnificent Moorish dome, serves as the spiritual center. Small theaters perform Yiddish dramas, cafes buzz with political debate, mutual aid societies help new arrivals find housing and work. The Scheunenviertel is also where Berlin's underworld thrives. Illegal gambling dens, brothels, fences dealing in stolen goods. Police raids are frequent, and anti-Semitic newspapers print lurid stories about, feeding prejudices that will have catastrophic consequences in the decades to come. Today, the Scheunenviertel has been absorbed into the district of Mitte and thoroughly gentrified. The Oranienburger Straße synagogue was badly damaged during Kristallnacht in 1938 and bombed during the war. Its restored golden dome now stands as a memorial. The narrow streets are now filled with art galleries, cafes, and boutiques. Only a few plaques and the Jewish Museum remind visitors of the vibrant, struggling community that once lived here. The turning point, July 1914. For years, tensions had been building across Europe, an arms race between empires, competing alliances, nationalist fervor, and colonial rivalries. Berlin in 1910 seemed prosperous and stable, but beneath the surface, dangerous currents were flowing. The German Empire, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, pursued an aggressive foreign policy, building a massive navy to challenge British supremacy, demanding __1_ for German colonialism. Relations with France remained poisonous after the Franco-Prussian War. The alliance system, Germany and Austria-Hungary on one side, France, Russia, and Britain on the other, meant that any regional conflict could escalate into continental war. Domestically, the contradictions we've seen throughout this tour were reaching a breaking point. The Social Democrats had become the largest party in the Reichstag by 1912, but real power remained with the Kaiser and the aristocracy. Workers demanded reform. The elite resisted. The gap between rich and poor was a chasm. Then came the summer of 1914. On June 28th, a Serbian nationalist assassinated the Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. What should have been a regional crisis spiraled out of control as the alliance system activated like a machine that no one could stop. In Berlin, the news arrived on July 28th. Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia. Within days, the dominoes fell. Russia mobilized to support Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, then on France. When German armies marched through Belgium to attack France, Britain entered the war. By August 4, 1914, Europe and Berlin had plunged into the abyss. The grand boulevards we've walked, filled with cheering crowds waving flags, convinced the war would be over by Christmas. Young men in those same factories we visited lined up to enlist, excited for adventure. The Kaiser appeared on the balcony of his palace and declared, quote, "2. What followed was 4 years of unimaginable slaughter. 2 million German soldiers died. Berlin's factories switched to producing artillery shells and poison gas. The British naval blockade brought starvation, turnip winter, when even that humble vegetable was scarce. The social order collapsed. In November 1918, revolution swept Berlin. Workers' and soldiers' councils seized power. The Kaiser fled to exile in Holland, and Germany became a republic born in defeat and chaos. Today, memorials throughout Berlin commemorate the Great War. The Neue Wache on Unter den Linden serves as Germany's central memorial to victims of war and dictatorship. But perhaps the greatest memorial is the absence, the void left by all the young men who marched away in August 1914 and never returned. The old world that died with them. Conclusion. Our journey through Berlin in 1910 has shown us a city of extraordinary contradictions. Behind the grand facades of imperial palaces and elegant boulevards existed a world of grinding poverty, industrial exploitation, and simmering social conflict. The same city that produced Einstein's theories and hosted magnificent opera also housed families in slum conditions that rivaled anything in Dickens's London. The legacy of this era remains visible everywhere in modern Berlin. The U-Bahn system that began in 1902 still carries millions of passengers. The museums and universities founded in the imperial period remain world-class institutions. The ideas debated in those cafes and union halls about democracy, workers' rights, women's suffrage, social justice shaped the 20th century and continue to resonate today. But 1910 Berlin also reminds us how quickly prosperity and stability can collapse, how blind societies can be to approaching catastrophe, how the refusal to address inequality and injustice can lead to disaster. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please comment below and tell us what city and what era you'd like to see brought to life next. Paris during the Belle Époque? New York in the Jazz Age? Ancient Rome at its height? Your suggestions help us decide where to travel next. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the past.